A very good morning to you. Let's start the introduction of the Pale Fire. What if I told you that one of the greatest novels of the 28th century isn't actually written like a novel at all? What if instead it's an elaborate trap, a maze of mirrors, smokes, and pure obsession designed by a literary magician to make you, especially the reader, an accomplice to be a psychological crime? Welcome back, everyone. Today, we are diving deep into a 1962 masterpiece that completely shattered the boundaries of literature, Vladimir Nabokov's Pale Fire. As you can see from our overview slide in image, this isn't just a book, it's an experience. Subtitle can be A Novel of Obsession, Shadows, and Interpretation. This work is part epic poem, part commentary, and part mystery. It is a labyrinth where absolutely nothing is quite as it seems. So grab your magnifying glass, we are about to unravel one of the most brilliant psychological puzzles in fiction. To truly understand Pale Fire, we first have to talk about its utterly unique, mind bending structure. If you open the book expecting a standard chapter by chapter story, you are going to be hopelessly lost. This book is split into three different parts. First one is the commentary, first one is the foreword, second part is the 999 line poem and which is divided into four cantos and followed by a commentary. So it's an exquisite piece of literature on its own, reflecting on life, death, and family. But the real novel begins after the poem. What follows is a sprawling, chaotic commentary written by Shade's neighbor and self proclaimed close friend Charles Kinbourne. He claims he is editing the poem after Shade's tragic assassination. But here's the twist. Kinbourne's notes are filled with wild digressions, deeply personal confessions, and paranoid delusions. Instead of actually explaining John Shade's poetry, Kinbourne hijacks the text to call his own story, a wild tale about being the exiled king of a distant, hidden land called Gemla. As our slide perfectly puts it, this creates a book built entirely of mirrors and smokes, blurring the line between truth and invention until the reader is completely forced to become an investigator. This bizarre structure allows Nabokov to play with some deeply profound themes. Let's break down the three major pillars highlighted right here on our slide. First one is identity and delusion. The ultimate question haunting every page of this book is who is Charles Kinbourne and who is John Shade? Is Kinbourne actually an exiled king running from an assassin named Gradus, or is he just a profoundly lonely, deeply delusional academic who has completely lost his grip on reality? Nabokov forces us to question the reliability of the narrator at every single turn. Secondly, we have the art and immortality. This is a poem within a novel, a piece of art commenting on another piece of art. Nabokov explores the incredible power and the tragic failure of creation. John Shea tries to find immortality through his poetry to cope with the loss of his daughter. Meanwhile, Kinbo tries to steal that art to immortalize his own delusions. It asks us, can art truly save us from our mortality? And third, we have obsession and exile. Kinbote is a self exiled king, or at least a man completely isolated from the world around him. He is living in a world of his own making, desperately reshaping reality because the actual truth of his life is too painful to bear. Look at the quote from Nabokov himself featured at the bottom of our slide. In Pale Fire, Nabokov invites us not just to read but to unravel. This isn't a passive reading experience. You can't just sit back and let the story happen to you. When you read Pale Fire, we are actively flipping back and forth between the poem and the footnotes, piecing together a mystery like a literary detective. You are constantly looking for the hidden meanings, the clever wordplay, and the subtle jokes that Nabokov hid in plain sight. It is a game of chess between the author and you. And every time you think you have figured out what's real and what's fake, Nabokov pulls the rug out from under your feet. If you pick up a copy of Nabokov's Pale Fire, open to page 1 and start reading straight through to the end, you are doing it completely wrong. In our last video, we have talked about the wild themes of obsession and delusion surrounding this masterpiece. But here we need to talk about the literal anatomy of this literary work. How do you actually read a book that is structured like a three-part puzzle box? Take a look at our breakdown slide. And you can see Nabokov famously subtitled this The Structure of a Literary Masterpiece, a novel within a poem within a commentary. So we are breaking down the three distinctive parts of this book, the foreword, the poem, and the commentary, and showing you how they collide to create one of the greatest metafictional mysteries ever told. Let's get into it. Our journey begins with part 1, which is the foreword. It's written by Charles Kinport, who introduces himself as an eccentric scholar and a deeply devoted neighbor to the recently deceased poet John Shea. Right from the start, as noted in our slide, the foreword sets the stage. Kinboard's job here is supposedly simple: introduce the poem and explain how he managed to secure the master manuscript after Shade was murdered. But Kinboard cannot keep himself out of the spotlight. Even in these opening pages, his writing is dripping with condensation, vanity, and strange hints that he is much more important than a mere professor. He immediately starts drop-shipping clues about the royal exile, making the reader realize that this isn't just an academic introduction at all. It is the opening act of a psychological takeover. Once you cross that threshold of the foreword, you hit part 2, which is the 999-line poem by John Shade. As the slide explicitly shows, this is the literal heart of the book. It's a complex, enigmatic piece of literature written in heroic couplets split perfectly into four cantos. Canto number 1 containing lines 1 to 249, Canto number 2, lines 250 to 499, Canto 3, line 500 to 749, and Canto 4, line 750 to 999. While the Canto 1 explicitly depicts about where Shade explores his childhood, his early encounters with the concept of death, and that famous image of the wax-winged bird. In Canto 2, a deeply poignant look at his family, his marriage, and the devastating suicide of his daughter Hazel. Canto 3, his intellectual struggle with the afterlife and his search for cosmic meaning. Canto 4, a reflection on his poetic process right up until the moment his life is abruptly cut short. Shade's poem is grounded, human, and devastatingly honest. It explores art, jealousy, and the nature of reality. But is also the bait in Nabokov's trap, because while the poem is beautiful on its own, it's completely hijacked by what comes next. This brings us to part 3, the commentary, also by Charles Kinport. And as you can see from the graphic on our slide, this section is a massive labyrinth mountain of text. In fact, the commentary is significantly longer than the poem itself. This is where the novel turns into a psychological thriller. Kinboard goes line by line, word by word through Shade's poem, supposedly providing literary analysis, but instead he spins a wild, sprawling narrative about the imaginary kingdom of Jamla, royal escapades, and political intrigue. Our slide lists the ingredients of this madness: biographical facts about Shade that seem completely raw, personal memoirs of Kinbote's elect royalty, and the history of Jamla. Kinbote is convinced that Shade's poetry is completely secretly about him and his lost kingdom, even though Shade's verses never mention Jamla once. It is a masterclass in unreliable narration. Now, when you look at the bottom of the slide, it looks linear, forward to poem, poem to commentary. But the genius of Bill Fire, as highlighted in the center box, is that the reader must actively navigate between the poet and the commentator. To read this book, you have to read a footnote, flip back to the poem, check another note, cross reference an index entry, and constantly question the sanity of the person guiding you. You become an active participant in a mystery. We will close today with a quote featured on the parchment at the bottom right. The balefire is a mirror image in which the reader chooses for the face. So whose face are we choosing for? Shades, Kinboard's, or perhaps Nabokov's? Let me know in the comment box how you tackle reading this book. Did you read the poem straight through first, or did you jump back and forth into commentary madness? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I will see you in my next video where I will be discussing about the foreword. Thank you.